The moment I stepped into Bellagio, I knew I didn't belong. The restaurant gleamed like another world, one made of crystal light, expensive perfume, and the kind of quiet confidence money breeds. Golden chandeliers cast soft reflections across white linen tables. Conversations drifted like whispers in Italian, a language that sounded too beautiful for small talk. I smoothed the fabric of my black dress, willing my nerves to calm. It was the only elegant thing I owned. Bought second-hand from a vintage shop in Florence, the city where I worked as an assistant curator in a modest art gallery. I had told myself the dress made me look confident. It didn't. "Your table, Signorina Ward." The maitre d' smiled with professional warmth and pulled out a chair. I thanked him softly, lowering myself into the seat, my posture straight but heart uncertain. Every second here felt measured, as if time itself cost more than I could afford. Nathan Cole was late, 15 minutes. I checked my phone again. No message. This dinner would consume half of my monthly salary. It was supposed to mark both our one-year anniversary and Nathan's permanent promotion at Milan Financial. It should have felt like a celebration. It didn't. The waiter approached. "Would Signorina like something to drink while waiting?" "Just water, please." I wasn't bold enough to drink alone, and not rich enough to fake it. When the glass was placed before me, the door opened. Nathan walked in, just as the jazz band shifted to a slower rhythm. He looked polished yet hurried, shirt slightly creased, tie loosened, phone in hand. "Sorry, traffic was a nightmare." He kissed my cheek and sat as if nothing were wrong. "I was on time," I murmured. "Of course you were." His smile didn't reach his eyes. "Let's have the 2015 Barbaresco." He didn't ask. He never did. As he leaned forward, light brushed against his collar, and I saw it, a faint pink smudge. Lipstick. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. My heart stuttered. "You came straight from work?" I asked, voice calm, almost too calm. "Yeah, long day," he said, eyes on his phone. "Meetings with new investors." I nodded, pretending to listen, while silence roared in my head. Around me, crystal glasses chimed. Laughter rose and fell, and I shrank smaller in my seat. My gaze wandered until it caught on the far corner of the room. 3 men sat at a private table. 2 faced outward, alert and watchful. The third sat with his back to the room, but even so he owned it. Every movement, every stillness, spoke of authority. Then one of the men leaned forward to whisper, and the man in the center turned. The chandelier's light slid over his face, strong jaw, straight nose, dark eyes calm and cutting. I knew that face, or rather, the name behind it. Adrian Russo, shipping magnate, art patron, and the man said to control half of northern Italy's imports, and the silence around the other half. Our eyes met, just for a second, yet it felt like the air shifted. Something in his gaze held me still, equal parts danger and curiosity. Then he turned away, but I could still feel the trace of it, like heat left after a flame. "Elena, are you listening?" Nathan's voice cut through the moment. "Sorry, what?" "I asked if you talked to your father about the investment." "He's not interested, Nathan. His retirement isn't for your projects." His smile tightened. "We'll talk later?" He stood, already reaching for his phone, and walked off. I stayed, fingers curled around the cold glass, staring at nothing. Across the room, Adrian Russo hadn't moved, and though I wasn't looking his way, I could feel it, the weight of unseen eyes, and the quiet certainty that something in my life had just begun to change. I sat there, fingers resting on the cold glass, as the noise of the restaurant slowly returned to its elegant rhythm. Nathan had stepped out to take a call, leaving me alone with the heavy silence between us. My thoughts tangled in circles, part disbelief, part denial. The lipstick stain on his collar still burned in my mind, a tiny wound I couldn't stop touching. I tried to distract myself, glancing toward the far corner where Adrian Russo remained. He was still seated, talking quietly with someone. The light above his table caught the edge of his profile, sharp, composed, beautiful in its restraint. Even without looking at me, I felt his awareness, like an invisible thread pulling tight between us. Then, suddenly, a sharp sound cut through the hum of conversation. The staccato click of high heels against marble. A woman's voice rang out, furious and trembling. "Nathan!" The entire restaurant fell silent. I turned, startled, just as a woman in a scarlet dress strode in, her face pale with rage and humiliation. She scanned the room until her eyes locked on my table. "Where is he?" she demanded. "Where is that bastard?" And then I saw Nathan returning from the hallway, his face draining of color. "Maria," he said softly, "what are you doing here?" She laughed, but it was the kind of laughter that breaks before it begins. "What am I doing here?" Her voice shook. "You disappeared after taking every euro I had. You promised I'd get it back when your company turned a profit. You said you loved me, Nathan." A collective gasp rippled through the restaurant. Forks paused midair. The air felt electric, crackling with curiosity. I sat frozen. My hands gripped the table so tightly my knuckles turned white. I think you're mistaken," I stammered, but my voice came out faint. Maria turned to me then, eyes blazing. "You're her, aren't you? The new one. Do you even know who he really is? He used your father's name to secure loans for his company. Richard Ward, that's your father, isn't it?" Her words struck like a slap. My mind went blank. Around me, the world tilted. Nathan tried to speak, but his voice faltered. "Elena, listen, it's not what it sounds like." Maria let out a hollow laugh. "No? Should I show them the emails, the transfers?" Whispers rippled through the crowd. People turned in their seats, hungry for scandal. I could feel their pity, their judgment. My vision blurred, and for a moment I thought I might faint. "Nathan," I said softly, trembling, "tell me she's lying." He couldn't meet my eyes. "Elena, please let me explain." "Explain," Maria shouted. "He can't explain a damn thing. He lied to both of us." She turned toward me again. "If you're smart, you'll run before he drags you down too." A waiter hurried over, whispering apologies, while a security guard appeared near the door. Nathan reached for my hand, but I pulled away. Everything inside me was unraveling. Shame burned hot behind my ribs. "I can't do this," I whispered, standing. My voice trembled, but I forced each word out. "Not here, not tonight." "Elena," Nathan began, but I was already walking away. As I turned, I collided with a waiter carrying a tray of wine. The glasses crashed to the floor, red liquid splashing across my dress, cold and stinging. Gasps filled the air, but I didn't stop. I didn't even apologize. I just ran. My heels clicked frantically across the marble floor. I pushed through a side hallway, desperate to find the exit. The corridor was dim, lined with heavy doors. One stood slightly open, and without thinking, I slipped inside. It wasn't an exit. It was a private room. 3 men sat around a long wooden table. At the head of it was Adrian Russo. He lifted his gaze to meet mine, and in that single instant, everything inside me went still. The lighting in the private room was dimmer, warmer, a world away from the bright elegance outside. The scent of tobacco and leather hung in the air, thick and expensive, the kind that didn't welcome accidents. I froze in the doorway, hand still on the knob, heart hammering so loudly I could hear it in my ears. 3 men sat around a long wooden table, papers and phones scattered before them. At the head of the table was Adrian Russo. He lifted his head at the sound of the door. His gaze, steady, sharp, deliberate, met mine for barely a second, yet it was enough to pin me where I stood. I'm sorry, I stammered, voice trembling. I thought this was the exit. One of the men near the door moved before I could finish. His hand slipped under his jacket, fingers brushing the outline of a gun. My breath caught, the world shrank to the click of his thumb on metal. Adrian raised his hand slightly. Just that small motion, and the man stopped instantly. No need. His voice was quiet but carried weight, the kind that silenced everything else. He looked at me for another moment. "Who are you?" Elena Ward," I managed to say. I must have opened the wrong door. "The wrong door," he repeated, a faint curl at the corner of his lips, something between disbelief and amusement. Then he turned to one of the men beside him. "Franco, check the hall." Franco stood, opened the door briefly, glanced outside, then nodded. "She's alone, sir." "I really am sorry," I blurted. "I'll go now." But before I could move, the door behind me burst open. Nathan rushed in, pale and frantic. "Elena," he grabbed my arm. "What the hell are you doing in here?" Before I could answer, Adrian spoke, low, cold, cutting through the air like steel. "Take your hand off her." The room went utterly still. Nathan froze, fingers trembling against my wrist. "I am sorry, Mr. Russo," he stammered. "She doesn't know anything. She's not." Mr. Russo. The way he said it, the fear in his voice, told me everything I needed to know. "You know him," I whispered. Adrian's eyes never left Nathan. "He's not just an acquaintance. He works with one of the smaller firms tied to my operations." Nathan shook his head rapidly. "No, I just handled a few accounts. Nothing illegal, I swear." "Sit down," Adrian said. He didn't raise his voice, but the command dropped like a weight. Nathan sat. I stood there, caught between disbelief and dread. The air felt heavy, dense with unspoken things. Adrian's attention shifted back to me, and for a moment, something unreadable flickered in his expression. Curiosity, maybe, or restraint. "Miss Ward," he said finally, voice even. "My apologies for the misunderstanding, but this isn't a place you should be." "I understand," I whispered. "I'll leave." He nodded once. "Marco." The tall man near the door stepped forward. "See that she gets out safely. Use the east exit. No one touches her." Marco gestured for me to follow. I turned toward the door, relief and confusion tangling in my chest. But just before I stepped out, I felt it. Adrian's gaze on me again. Not hostile, not exactly protective either, just watchful. When the door shut behind me, the murmur of the restaurant returned, but I couldn't shake the echo of that moment. The weight of his voice, the command in his silence. I didn't know who Adrian Russo really was, but somehow I knew this wouldn't be the last time he looked at me that way. That night, I barely slept. The scene from the private room replayed in my mind again and again. Adrian Russo's steady gaze, the calm authority in his voice, and the way Nathan had trembled when he called him Mr. Russo. That name was no longer just a rumor in glossy magazines. It was real, dangerous, and somehow intertwined with me. The next morning, I was still sitting by the window when my phone rang. Unknown number. I hesitated but answered. "Miss Ward," a polite male voice said. "I'm calling on behalf of Mr. Russo. He requests your presence this morning at his private office on Via della Spiga. The car is waiting downstairs. I think there's been a mistake." "There isn't," the voice interrupted, then ended the call. My pulse quickened. I should have refused, but something told me refusing Adrian Russo wasn't exactly wise. I dressed carefully, plain white blouse, beige skirt, and forced my hands to stop shaking. The black Mercedes waited outside, its driver silent as I slid into the seat. Milan glided by through tinted glass, morning light, polished storefronts, the steady rhythm of a city that belonged to people far more certain than I was. His office occupied the top floor of an old stone building on Via della Spiga. Inside, the air smelled of leather, polished wood, and espresso, the scent of quiet power. A silver-haired woman in a tailored black dress led me through a long corridor. "Mr. Russo is expecting you," she said, opening the door. The room was vast, bathed in muted daylight. Adrian stood by the balcony, back turned, sleeves rolled up. When he faced me, he looked different from the night before. Controlled, immaculate, the embodiment of composure. "Thank you for coming, Miss Ward," he said, his voice low and even. "Please sit." I obeyed, clasping my hands to hide the tremor. "I still don't understand why you wanted to see me." "Because I dislike debt," he replied, pouring 2 cups of espresso. "And at the moment, there's a rather large one attached to your name, though you didn't create it." I frowned. "What do you mean?" He slid a black folder across the desk. Inside were contracts, signatures, financial records. Nathan Cole borrowed over 2 million euros from a man named Carlo Bianco, a financier with unconventional methods. He used your father's name, Richard Ward, as guarantor. The words blurred. My father's signature, there on the final page, familiar and trembling. "This can't be real," I whispered. "My father doesn't even know." "I believe you," Adrian said. "But Bianco won't care. He'll come for repayment, and your father's name is on the line." Cold fear spread through me. "Why are you showing me this?" "Because I want you to understand the danger you're in," he said calmly, "and because I can make it disappear if you help me." "Help you?" I echoed. Adrian leaned back slightly, his eyes never leaving mine. "I can protect your father, erase the debt, ensure Bianco never touches either of you. In return, you'll give me information, whatever you learn from Nathan or the people around him. Nothing elaborate, just enough for me to know what I'm dealing with." "You want me to spy on him?" "If that's how you wish to describe it." A flicker of amusement passed through his eyes. "You're the only person he still trusts. Use that." I shook my head, overwhelmed. "Why? Why help me?" His expression softened, though his tone remained measured. "Because I don't like seeing the innocent pay for others' mistakes. And because—" He paused, eyes darkening. "You don't deserve to be caught in someone else's ruin." Silence fell between us. I could hear my heartbeat, loud and uneven. This man was dangerous, I knew that, but his words carried an odd sincerity I couldn't ignore. Finally, I asked, barely audible, "If I agree, my father will be safe?" "You have my word," he said quietly, "and my word means something." I stared at him, torn between fear and a strange sense of trust. There was something magnetic about his calm, something that both unsettled and steadied me. "I'll do it," I said at last, "but I need to know what I'm getting into." A faint smile curved his lips, the kind that didn't quite reach his eyes. "You will," he promised, "in time." And in that moment I knew, whatever I had just agreed to, there was no going back. When I left Adrian Russo's office, the Milan sky had turned gray. Rain slicked the streets, reflecting headlights and hurried faces. I walked without direction, my thoughts spinning. 2 million euros, Carlo Bianco, my father's name, and a man who promised protection with a calm that terrified me. That night, I didn't call anyone. I sat in my dark apartment, phone screen glowing faintly against the coffee cup in my hands. Adrian's voice still echoed in my head, low, controlled, impossible to ignore. The next morning, I received a text from AR Begin Today. "Don't let him suspect. I'll know if you're in danger. No greeting, no instructions." And somehow that was enough to make me believe him. I met Nathan later that afternoon. His call came first, his voice full of contrition, of half-truths. He said he wanted to explain that everything had been a misunderstanding. I agreed to meet him, partly out of duty, partly out of a need for closure. We met at a small cafe near the center of Milan. Nathan arrived in his usual tailored suit, but his face looked drawn, anxious. "Elena," he began quickly, "I know I hurt you. I never meant to drag you into this. I just made mistakes." "Mistakes?" I repeated quietly. "Like forging my father's signature?" He winced. "I needed funding to keep the company alive. Bianco offered help. I didn't know he'd turn dangerous." "Didn't you?" I asked, studying him. "Have you met him?" Nathan's eyes flicked up, wary. "Who told you about Bianco?" "You did," I said smoothly. "A long time ago." He hesitated, then sighed. "Yes, he's dangerous. But I'm handling it, Elena. You have to trust me." I forced a trembling breath, pretending to hesitate. "I want to trust you," I whispered. "But my father—" He reached for my hand. "I'll fix this. Just don't talk to anyone, okay?" That line, "don't talk to anyone," echoed in my head long after we left the cafe. It was proof. Adrian had been right all along. Nathan was hiding something bigger than I could see. 2 days later, Enzo called. "Mr. Russo would like to see you. Tonight." By the time I reached the villa, night had fallen. Iron gates opened silently as I entered. Lights lined the long driveway, each one flickering on in sequence. The world inside those gates felt colder, quieter, perfectly ordered, and utterly inescapable. Adrian was waiting in his study. No coffee this time, no small talk. "You spoke to him?" "Yes," I said. "He mentioned Bianco, said he's trying to get out." Adrian's expression hardened. There is no out in Bianco's world, only people who pay less for their mistakes. He moved around the desk, stopping close enough for me to smell the faint trace of his cologne, wood, smoke, and something darker. "You did well, Elena, but don't let him sense the change. One wrong word and he'll know." "I'm not good at pretending," I admitted. A faint smile touched his lips. "You're doing better than you think." He was close now, his gaze steady, unreadable. "Are you afraid of me?" he asked quietly. I hesitated. "I'm not sure. Maybe I'm afraid of what you represent." He studied me for a moment, then nodded. An honest answer. I respect that. He handed me a small envelope. Inside are copies of the contracts. If he mentions Bianco or the money, remember every detail. I took it, my fingers cold. "And if he finds out?" Adrian's eyes softened, but his voice did not. Then he won't have the chance to hurt anyone again. You have my word. That promise felt nothing like comfort. It was iron, sharp, unyielding, dangerous. But for reasons I couldn't name, I believed him. I understand, I whispered. When I left the villa, the night air was sharp and cold. The lights behind me dimmed one by one as the gates closed. I realized then that trust, once given to a man like Adrian Russo, was no longer a gift. It was a trap, beautiful, silent, and already closing around me. I thought I could have a few quiet days. After that night at Adrian's villa, I tried to return to normal, avoiding Nathan's calls, pretending the world hadn't shifted. But Adrian's last words kept echoing in my head. Don't let him sense the change. One mistake, and you'll be in danger. That afternoon, Milan was drenched in rain. The gray sky pressed low, and the streets below my apartment blurred into silver streaks. I was pouring another cup of coffee when someone knocked. 3 sharp, deliberate knocks. Not the kind neighbors made. I froze, glanced through the peephole. 2 men stood outside, wearing dark coats. One held a folded umbrella. The other had his hands deep in his pockets. Something in their stillness made my stomach twist. Signorina Ward? The voice outside was deep, rough, distinctly Italian. We're here on behalf of Mr. Bianco. He'd like to have a word. My pulse spiked. You've made a mistake, I said through the door, forcing my voice steady. I don't know him. A low chuckle followed. Oh, I think you do, mister. Bianco said you were the last person to see Nathan Cole. The sound of metal scraped against the lock. I stumbled back, heart pounding. My hands shook as I grabbed my phone and dialed the only number my mind could summon. The call connected on the first ring. Adrian Russo. There are men at my door. They said they're from Bianco. Don't hang up. His voice cut in, calm and commanding. Lock the door. Don't speak again. I heard him mutter something in Italian to someone nearby. Then the faint roar of an engine. Outside, the knocking grew louder. Open the door, signorina. We just want to talk. I ran to the window, fumbling for a way out, but the metallic groan of the lock made me freeze. The door burst open, and the 2 men stepped in, bringing the smell of rain and cigarettes with them. I told you I don't know anything, I shouted. One of them smiled coldly. You'll talk, signorina. If not today, then tomorrow. Mr. Bianco doesn't like waiting. My fingers closed around a kitchen knife, trembling so hard I could barely hold it. They moved closer, and then the sound of tires screeching outside. A door slammed. The next second, the apartment door flew open. The first man hit the wall before he could react. The second spun around but didn't last long. A solid blow sent him crashing to the floor. Marco. I recognized him instantly. Adrian's driver, calm and unreadable. He held a gun angled downward, expression impassive. Out, he said in Italian. The men staggered up and stumbled toward the door. When they were gone, Marco turned to me. You're all right? I nodded weakly, tears burning my eyes. They knew where I lived. They said Bianco. Bianco knows everything, Marco interrupted. But now Mr. Russo does too. Come. I barely had time to grab my coat before following him down the stairs. A black car waited at the curb, headlights slicing through the rain. When the door opened, Adrian was inside. His face, half lit by the dashboard glow, was unreadable. I slid into the seat, still shaking. For a few moments he said nothing, only looked at me, as if assessing whether I was whole. Then he spoke, voice low but absolute. I told you, you're never to be alone again." "I didn't think they knew where I lived," I whispered. "Bianco knows more than you think," he replied. "And he doesn't forgive trespass." He paused. "You'll leave Milan tonight. Enzo will take you to London. Bring your father back with you. From now on, you're not to be alone, Elena." The way he said my name, steady, final, sent a strange ache through my chest. I wanted to argue, but fear silenced me. He wasn't just protecting me, he was claiming responsibility for my life. Outside the window, the city lights blurred into the rain. Milan faded behind us, and with it, the illusion that I still had control over anything. Somewhere between fear and an unfamiliar sense of surrender, I realized the truth. I hadn't just been rescued by Adrian Russo. I had been claimed by him. 2 days later, we returned to Italy. The flight from London was quiet. My father sat beside me, his eyes full of questions I couldn't answer. I had only told him that someone was helping us fix the mess Nathan had created. He nodded, but I could see the doubt beneath his calm. How could he believe me when I barely understood it myself? A sleek black car waited as we left the airport. The driver opened the door and said simply, "Mr. Russo is expecting you." My father frowned, but got in without a word. The road to Lake Como curved through hills and olive groves, past small villages nestled against the mountains. When the car passed through the tall iron gates, I saw the villa, a grand stone estate perched above the lake, its red-tiled roof glowing under the pale sun. It was breathtakingly beautiful and too quiet. Men in dark suits moved silently around the property, their eyes sweeping every corner. My father leaned toward me and whispered, "Elena, what is this place? Why are there guards?" "It's the safest place he could offer," I said, though I wasn't sure I believed it. Inside, the villa smelled of cedar and old marble. Adrian was waiting at the top of the stairs, leaning against the railing in a white shirt. The light from the chandeliers caught in his dark hair. When he came down, I saw my father straighten instinctively. The quiet authority Adrian carried was something even he couldn't ignore. "Professor Ward," Adrian greeted, his tone polite yet firm. "I'm glad you're here. From now on, you'll both stay until this is over." My father shook his hand. "Thank you, Mr. Russo, but I assume this isn't just a financial matter, is it?" Adrian's lips curved faintly. "No, Professor, it's a matter of loyalty and betrayal." Dinner that night was served in a long hall overlooking the lake. Candles burned on the dark wooden table, their light reflecting off crystal glasses. Marco and Enzo stood quietly nearby, shadows in the corners. I sat between Adrian and my father, feeling the tension coil between us. Adrian spoke first. He told my father about Nathan, how he had betrayed both Bianco and the people behind him, how he had sold confidential data and disappeared. "Bianco won't forgive that," Adrian said evenly, eyes flicking toward me. "He'll go after anyone connected to him." My father set down his glass. "So my daughter stands between two sides of a war she never chose." Adrian met his gaze. "Yes, but I can promise you this, she won't be the casualty." Silence followed, heavy and unspoken. The only sound was the rain against the windows and the quiet crackle of candle flames. Later that night, I couldn't sleep. I stepped onto the balcony where the air smelled of water and jasmine. The lake shimmered under the moonlight, calm and silver, almost unreal. "You're not used to silence, are you?" The deep voice came from behind. I turned. Adrian stood in the doorway, a glass of wine in hand. The moonlight traced his features, half shadow, half light. "I thought I'd feel safe here," I said softly, "but it feels suffocating." He walked closer, slow and deliberate. "Safety and freedom rarely coexist, Elena. You have to choose one. You're keeping me here, aren't you?" "I'm keeping you alive," he replied. The distance between us vanished. I could smell the faint trace of wine and leather on his skin. My pulse quickened, too loud in the quiet. Adrian studied me for a long moment. "Nathan betrayed everyone. Bianca won't stop. You have to trust me." "I'm trying," I whispered, "but you scare me." He gave a low, dark smile. "Good. Fear keeps you alive." Then he turned and left, the sound of his footsteps fading into the villa's silence. I stayed there, staring at the lake. Lake Como lay perfectly still, but inside me, the water had already begun to ripple. From that night on, I knew Adrian Russo was no longer just my protector. He was the danger I couldn't look away from. The days that followed passed in a strange kind of silence. The villa by Lake Como felt detached from the rest of the world. No cars, no calls, only the whisper of wind through the trees and the soft rhythm of water against stone. My father had grown fond of the vast library, spending hours among its rare manuscripts, while I spent my mornings exploring the gallery Adrian had called the forgotten wing of the house. The gallery was breathtaking. 15th century paintings lined the walls beside marble busts and Renaissance sketches I'd only ever seen in textbooks. It felt like a secret version of Adrian, refined, mysterious, and private. On the third afternoon, as I stood studying a Botticelli, his voice came from behind me. "What do you see in it?" I turned. Adrian stood by the door, sleeves rolled up, collar open, his hair slightly tousled. The fading sunlight turned him golden, unreal. "I didn't think you cared much for art," I said lightly. He moved closer, his gaze on the painting. "Surprised that someone like me might care about beauty?" "I'm surprised you have time to notice it," I replied. He smiled faintly. "Perhaps, but some things, once you see them, you can't look away. Like you, Elena." My breath caught. The way he said my name, soft, deliberate, felt like both a touch and a claim. "You always speak as if you're giving orders," I managed. "No," he said quietly. "I simply don't hide what I want." Silence stretched between us, the kind that hums with unspoken tension. "I used to think I understood the world," I murmured. "Since meeting you, everything feels uncertain." His eyes softened, but his voice remained low, steady. "My world isn't for the fragile, but you're not fragile. You look at me without fear. I respect that." He stepped closer, his words dropping to a murmur. "You make me forget who I was before this." The air thickened. I wasn't sure who moved first. When his lips touched mine, time stopped. The kiss was soft at first, then deepened, urgent, intoxicating. The taste of wine, the warmth of his breath, the dizzy pulse between us. It all blurred together, dangerous and undeniable. His hand found the small of my back, drawing me closer. Thought disappeared. There was only sensation, the quiet certainty that, in this moment, the world belonged to him. Then a voice broke the spell. "Elena!" I froze. My father stood at the doorway, his face unreadable, no anger, only a profound sadness. Adrian stepped back, regaining that unshakable calm of his. "I'm sorry," I whispered. My father looked at me for a long time before saying softly, "Women of the Ward family have never belonged to anyone. Remember that, my daughter." Adrian's expression didn't change. but I knew he'd heard every word. My father turned and left, his footsteps fading down the hall, leaving behind a silence sharper than any reprimand. When Adrian walked away moments later, I could still feel the echo of his lips, burning like a secret I couldn't erase. I knew I had crossed a line, one I could never step back over. That night, lying in my room overlooking the lake, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Adrian's gaze, not tender, not cruel, but something in between, something that undid me. I was falling into something I couldn't name, a feeling too dangerous to be love, too deep to deny. And the worst part was, I no longer wanted to escape it. 3 days later, Adrian said we were returning to Milan. His words were simple, as always. "Tomorrow night, there's a gala. You'll come with me." I didn't ask why. The next morning, a long box waited on my bed. Inside was a deep blue silk gown, smooth as water, with a small handwritten note, the color of Como, A. When I stepped out of the car that night, flashes exploded around us. The gala was held at the Excelsior Gallia, a palace of glass and gold where cars lined the entrance. Adrian got out first, then offered me his hand as if it were the most natural thing in the world. No one dared stop him. They only watched, curious, wary, fascinated. I heard the whispers ripple through the crowd like static. "Who is she?" "The woman with Russo." Another one of his protégés, probably. I wanted to pull my hand away, but Adrian's grip tightened, light, firm, enough to tell me that leaving wasn't an option. He leaned close, his voice low against the noise. "Keep your chin up. In this world, those who bow lose first." Inside, the ballroom glittered under chandeliers, every surface polished to perfection. Men in tuxedos, women in silk, champagne glasses clinking softly to the rhythm of jazz. Adrian exchanged a few words with people who mattered. They all greeted him with that mix of respect and fear I'd come to recognize. A blonde woman approached, smiling too sweetly. "People say Russo never brings anyone. You must be special." Her perfume lingered long after she left. Adrian's glance was cool. "Ignore them. This world feeds on rumor, not truth." I was about to answer when I froze. A voice, hoarse, familiar, cut through the hum of music. "Elena." I turned. "Nathan." He looked hollowed out, thinner, desperate. The sharpness that once defined him had collapsed into something pitiful. For a heartbeat, the room vanished, and all I saw was the man I used to love. "I just want to talk," he said quickly. "I didn't come to cause trouble. I know what I did was wrong, but you have to believe me. I never meant to hurt you." "Don't," I said quietly. "You should go." "You don't understand," he pressed on. "They're coming for me, Elena. Bianco, everyone. They want me dead. You can help me if you just talk to Russo." His words broke off as Adrian appeared beside me. He didn't need to raise his voice. One look from him made Nathan stumble back. "Don't ever say her name again," Adrian said, his tone like cold steel. "If you do, there won't be a next time." The entire ballroom went silent. Even the music seemed to stop. Nathan's jaw tightened. "She used to love me," he said, desperate, defiant. Adrian tilted his head slightly. "And now she doesn't." I saw it, the way Nathan's shoulders sank, the fight leaving his body. He turned and disappeared into the crowd, swallowed by the golden light. My hands trembled. "You didn't have to." "I did," Adrian interrupted. "For you. Remember, Elena, mercy gets people killed." He extended his hand. I looked at it, strong, commanding, and placed mine in his. The cameras flashed again, brighter this time. And just like that, my choice was made. That night, beneath the chandeliers and the watching eyes, I stood beside Adrian Russo, not as an outsider, but as part of his world. And though I knew that world could destroy me, I no longer wanted to turn away. The gala ended late. When we left the hotel, a light rain fell over Milan's avenues, streetlights glinting off the wet pavement. I sat in the car, hands trembling slightly, mind spinning with the noise, the whispers, and Nathan's fading figure swallowed by the crowd like a ghost. Adrian said nothing. Through the long drive, he kept his eyes on the road, one hand steady on the wheel, silence heavy between us. Not anger, but something deeper. It felt as if he was waiting for me to confront a truth he already knew. The car turned away from the city, following a narrow road along the lake. I realized we weren't heading toward the Como villa. "Where are we going?" I asked softly. "Somewhere more private," he replied. 40 minutes later, we stopped before a secluded house surrounded by pine trees, the lake shimmering behind it under a pale moon. No guards, no lights, only wind and the scent of wet grass. He opened the door for me. "Come in." Inside, the house was dim and warm. A small fire flickered in the hearth, lighting the wooden walls and framed paintings. I turned to him, but Adrian was already close, removing his coat, his expression unreadable. "If you leave tonight," he said quietly, "it all ends. I'll get you and your father out of Italy, safe, untouchable. You'll have your life back." I stared at him, heart pounding. "And if I stay?" "Then you choose my world," Adrian answered, "where safety comes with chains and trust can cut like a knife. I'll protect you, but you'll never truly be free of me." The wind outside howled against the windows like a warning. I stood there, caught between two hungers, one for freedom, the other for him. Since the night I met him, every layer of who I was had been stripped away. And now, facing him, I realized there was no going back. I took one step forward, then another. Adrian didn't move. He only watched, eyes dark and steady, as if holding his breath. When I stopped in front of him, I whispered, "I've already chosen." The kiss came slowly, but it cut deep. His hands found me, sure but not rough, as if afraid I'd vanish. I answered him, because in that moment, the world outside ceased to exist. No Bianco, no Nathan, no past, only this, firelight, breath, and the dangerous quiet between us. The rain outside fell harder, tapping against the glass, as shadows melted into one another. There was no line left between fear and desire, between surrender and survival. I knew I was trading freedom for safety, but when Adrian murmured against my skin, "No one will hurt you again," I stopped fighting. The night stretched endlessly. When dawn came, gray light seeped through the curtains. I woke to see Adrian standing by the window, shirt half buttoned, coffee steaming in his hand. He didn't turn when he spoke, his voice low and rough. "From now on, you're safe, Elena." I sat up, pulling the sheet close, watching his reflection in the mirror. Something in those words chilled me. They didn't sound like comfort. They sounded like possession. "Safe," I repeated softly. "But what about freedom?" He turned, his gaze locking onto mine, dark, heavy, irreversible. "Freedom," he said, "is what you give up when you choose someone. And last night, you chose." I felt the truth settle over me, cold and absolute. I hadn't just chosen Adrian Russo. I had chosen a world where love and captivity lived within the same breath. The days after the night of choice passed in a deceptive calm. Each morning I woke to the sound of footsteps outside my door. Guards changing shifts, always polite, always watching. Whenever I stepped outside, someone followed. Sometimes it was Enzo, sometimes a stranger with an earpiece and a measured stare. At first, I told myself it was protection, but soon I began to feel it tightening around me. When I wanted to walk in the garden, they shadowed me. When I asked to go to the nearby town to choose frames for the collection, they called Adrian. If he didn't approve, the answer was always the same. "I'm sorry, Signorina. Orders from Mr. Russo." One afternoon, while I was rearranging the paintings in the small gallery, I heard his voice behind me. "You shouldn't be doing that alone." I turned, irritation flickering. What should I do then? Ask permission to hang a painting? His eyes were calm, too calm. "Not permission, safety." I set the frame down. "You call this safety? Every door guarded, every move reported. I can't breathe without someone watching." "Protection isn't imprisonment, Elena." "But it feels the same." The words burst out before I could stop them. "You said you'd keep me safe, but you've locked me inside your world instead." For a long moment, he said nothing. Then quietly, "You don't understand how dangerous this is." "Maybe not," I replied, "but you don't understand how much I've lost to be here." I left before he could answer. Later that afternoon, I found my father in the library, sunlight catching the silver in his hair. Books were stacked around him, the air heavy with the scent of old pages. "Have you ever wondered," he said without looking up, "why your mother never talked about her past in Italy?" I hesitated. She said very little, only that her family was influential. He closed the book. She lived in a world like this one, where power and fear were the same language. Your grandfather was one of the most powerful men in the North, but your mother didn't want to be consumed by it. She left, but not completely. Half in, half out. She kept her connections to protect those she loved, but refused to be owned. His words hung between us. Then he looked at me, voice gentle but firm. "Elena, you can't destroy Russo's world, but you can negotiate with it. If you want to survive in it, set your own terms, just like your mother did." That night, I barely slept. By dawn, I knew what I had to do. Adrian was in his study when I entered. He looked up, surprised to see me still in my robe, hair tousled from the wind. "Elena, I need to talk." He nodded, dismissing the staff with a wave. When the door closed, I spoke before I could lose my nerve. "I'm not leaving, but I can't live like this. Watched, controlled. If you want me to stay, there have to be rules." He leaned back in his chair, studying me as though I'd just made my first real move on a chessboard. "And those rules are?" "I have 3 conditions," I said, steadying my voice. 1, I continue my work with Milan's museums. You can assign security, but you won't interfere. 2, my father goes back to London when things are safe. No more confinement for him. 3, every decision involving me, where I go, who I see, will be discussed, not dictated. Silence fell, only the faint tick of the clock and the soft rain against the windows. Adrian didn't speak. His eyes darkened, not in anger, but contemplation. Then he rose, walked toward me, stopping just close enough for me to feel the weight of his presence. "Are you challenging me, Elena?" I met his gaze. "No, I'm setting boundaries. If you want me to be yours, you have to let me remain myself." For a long moment, he said nothing. Then a quiet, unexpected smile curved his lips. "If you want to be my partner," he said, "then we start as equals." He extended his hand, not in dominance, but in acknowledgement. I looked at it, then placed mine in his. His skin was cool, steady, and for the first time, I felt that Adrian Russo wasn't just the man who held the keys to my cage, but perhaps the one willing to unlock it with me. I knew storms still waited beyond the horizon, but that morning, as our hands met, I realized something vital. I might be trapped in his world, but I just found the key, and it was mine to use. 3 months had passed since that morning when Adrian and I shook hands in his study. The morning I first felt that I was no longer being controlled. Since then, everything had changed, slowly but unmistakably. Adrian no longer dictated my schedule or ordered me around in trivial matters. I was free to move within a defined circle of safety, allowed to return to Milan to work, to meet colleagues from the art world I once belonged to. He no longer said, "I give you permission." Instead, he asked, "Are you sure this is what you want?" A simple question, but one that carried meaning. It told me that, between us, decisions were now shared. It wasn't absolute freedom, but it was acknowledgement, and that was enough. I spent the whole spring preparing for the biggest exhibition of my career, a collection curated from Adrian's private archives. Paintings the world thought were lost, Caravaggio, Botticelli, Parmigianino, all preserved in climate-controlled chambers deep beneath the villa at Lake Como. Adrian once told me, "I keep them not for their worth, but because they're the only things left that feel real." When I proposed to open the collection to the public, he simply looked at me for a long moment before replying, "If you believe they should be seen, then make it happen. No objection, no demand for explanation, just trust." On the opening night, Milan was wrapped in the brilliance of spring. I stood in the bright hall, surrounded by the hum of voices and the delicate chime of wine glasses. The first painting displayed in the center was The Rebirth of Light, an anonymous 16th century piece I had chosen as the heart of the theme, light and shadow. I wore an ivory silk gown, my hair tied neatly, and around my neck hung the sapphire pendant Adrian had given me, the color of Lake Como at sunrise. When the host announced my name, the spotlight fell, and through the crowd I saw him standing at the far end of the room. No flowers, no words, no applause. Just that look, quiet, proud, the kind that said, "You've done it." I smiled back. Between us, no more words were needed. The exhibition ran for 2 weeks, its success beyond what I had dared hope. Newspapers praised it. Critics called me the woman who resurrected the memory of Italian art. But Milan was never peaceful for long. One morning, while I was reading a draft of an interview, Enzo entered, his voice careful, almost hesitant, as he set a newspaper on the table. "Mr. Bianco is dead, signorina." Well, I looked at the bold headline, "Financial magnate Carlo Bianco dies of cardiac arrest at his Turin residence." 7 words, cold, flat, final. I read them over and over, feeling nothing. No pity, no satisfaction, only a hollow stillness. That evening, Adrian came home late. As I passed by the library, the door was slightly ajar, and I heard his voice, low, measured, decisive, on the phone. I said, "No traces. This is the last time I'll repeat it." I froze, my heart tightening. Everything I'd suspected now stood confirmed. Bianco hadn't died naturally. Adrian had ended what the law could not. I didn't knock. I didn't run. I just stood there, watching the firelight ripple across the floor. Maybe he was never the kind of good man the world would understand. But I knew he did it so that my world would never be touched by blood again. And the strangest part was, I understood and I accepted. A week later, after the exhibition closed, a letter arrived. No name, only a short handwritten line. I need to speak to you one last time. Nathan. I read it several times, then decided to meet him that afternoon in the courtyard behind the museum. There was no drama in it. Nathan appeared thinner, paler, the arrogance gone from his face. Elena, his voice cracked, I have nothing to justify anymore. I just came to say I'm sorry. I looked at him, seeing a man consumed by his own failures. You've already said enough, I replied calmly. Now silence will do. I know you hate me, he said, but Bianco, I know, I interrupted. He's dead. The story's over, Nathan. Not because someone won, but because there's nothing left worth losing. He lowered his head, tears spilling onto his hand. You've changed. No, I said softly. I just see things more clearly now. When Nathan walked away, I turned to find Adrian standing at the far end of the corridor, leaning against a marble pillar, his gaze warm with quiet pride. As he approached, he said, You just did what no one in my world ever manages. You ended something without destroying it. I smiled faintly. You taught me how to live in darkness. I just learned how to light a candle. He looked at me, his eyes softening. Maybe you were the one who saved me from it. That night, we returned to the villa by Lake Como. Summer had settled in. The water was smooth as glass. Inside the gallery, the paintings waited, glowing softly in the golden light. Adrian stopped in front of Judith and Holofernes, the centerpiece of the exhibition, and spoke quietly. My world used to be only shadows, but you made me realize that light doesn't erase darkness. It only helps us see what's truly there. I turned to him, my voice steady. And I choose to stay, to see it with you. He smiled, rare and genuine. His hand found mine, not in possession, but in connection. In the glass before us, our reflections stood side by side, equal, grounded, intertwined. The shadows still surrounded us, but this time the light stayed too, and for the first time I wasn't afraid anymore. After the exhibition, life at the villa by Lake Como slowly returned to its quiet rhythm. The following days passed in silence, only the whisper of wind over the lake and the golden light spilling from the window where Adrian often sat reading. Yet I knew beneath that calm something was shifting, something waiting to be spoken. A moment that would mark both an ending and a beginning. Lake Como in December was as quiet as a sheet of dark silk. Twilight had just settled. A soft mist hovered over the water, reflecting faint glimmers from the lanterns hanging beneath the villa's terrace. Inside, the fireplace burned steadily, filling the room with the scent of pinewood and red wine. Everything was still, yet something in the air felt poised, waiting to be spoken. I walked down the staircase, the hem of my deep blue velvet dress brushing against the polished wood. Adrian stood by the fireplace, his back to me, a small black velvet box resting on the table beside him. The firelight played along his shoulders, softening the sharp edges of his frame. When I reached him, he turned, a faint smile flickering at the corner of his mouth, rare, genuine, and fleeting as breath. "Do you know," he began, voice low and steady, "this is the first winter in years that I haven't felt cold? I smiled, folding my arms. Maybe the fireplace is finally working properly. He shook his head slightly. No, Elena, it's because, for the first time, I'm not standing alone. I didn't answer. We simply looked at each other in the kind of silence that no longer needed words. Adrian took a step closer. His gaze lingered on my face, the fire reflecting in the gray of his eyes. I used to think, he said softly, that protecting someone meant keeping them inside my world. But you've taught me that love isn't about possession. It's about coexistence. He opened the box. Inside was an emerald ring, the stone cut into a teardrop shape, glowing deep green like the lake beneath the night. I recognized it instantly, the one he had kept locked away in his safe, his mother's ring, the only thing she'd left behind before she disappeared. I know this stone, I whispered. He nodded. It was once a promise between my parents. Now I want it to become ours. He paused, eyes fixed on mine. We began with protection, then came passion. Now it's forever. I looked at the ring, then back at him. Something inside me trembled, not out of fear, but as though I was standing between my past and everything that lay ahead. Adrian, I said slowly, I don't want forever if it means captivity. I want it to be a choice, every day, for both of us. He was silent for a moment, then smiled, the rare kind of smile that reached his eyes, warm and unguarded. On your terms, he said quietly. On your terms, Elena Ward. When he slid the ring onto my finger, the light from the fire and chandelier refracted through the emerald, breaking into tiny green rays that scattered across my skin. I didn't cry, but it felt as though the entire world had folded into the sound of my heartbeat. Are you sure? I asked softly, eyes still fixed on the ring. What if, one day, I stopped choosing you? He stepped closer, the space between us narrowing to a breath. Then I won't need a promise. I'll just wait. And when you choose to return, I'll still be here. I laughed quietly, my voice trembling. That's the strangest proposal I've ever heard. And the truest, he replied. We kissed. It was no longer the hungry, desperate kind of kiss from those first nights, but something slower, deeper, full of peace. I felt his breath mix with mine, tasted the warmth of wine and smoke, and beneath it all, the steady rhythm of his heartbeat, like a song I knew would never fade. When we finally pulled apart, the light from the crystal chandelier cascaded through the room. It struck the emerald, splitting into 1,000 tiny rainbows that danced across the walls, the floor, our skin. It was a simple moment, yet so perfect that I knew I would carry it with me forever. I looked up at him and whispered, I once thought I was trapped in your cage. Adrian tilted his head slightly, waiting for the rest. I smiled, my voice barely more than a breath. But it turned out to be the only place I ever learned what freedom truly means. And see, he laughed quietly, his hand brushing my cheek as if to imprint the moment into memory. Outside, the mist thickened. The wind rippled across the lake, forming slow, widening circles. Inside the villa, there was only the soft crackle of the fire and the sound of my heart keeping pace with his. There were no vows of eternity, no grand ceremony, only two people who had walked through darkness and now stood together in the light. And in that moment, I understood something simple yet absolute. Real love doesn't begin with a promise. It begins when two people choose each other, even knowing that the shadows will always remain.